It's been really sensitive. Like when I downloaded them from yesterday, there were 6 videos recorded, and I actually only did 3 classes, but they were all like these like momentary videos. It's really weird. So I have to be very careful on that. Also, I'm turning it off at the end of the period. One day I ended up recording Mr. Blevin's class that came right after my other class because I forgot to turn it off. Oops, yeah, all right. Oops. All right, so good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let's have your attention, please. All quiet, please. Thank you. So go ahead and take out your notes on World War I. We're going to be continuing on World War I. Oh, yeah, we're going to do that. No, I'm not going to forget that part. Yeah, I mean, and thank you for playing the role of Mia, because usually Mia is like, I'm not going to sit down. Yeah, so, I mean, that's fun. Oh, speaking of, there we go. I say your name, and you appear. Wonderful. Because we're going to do we're going to do the pledge. I was just telling Haley, I'm not going to forget doing the pledge. Then after you do that, we'll have you do this, okay? And then let me, I think, didn't I give you this? Okay, good grief. Papers. This is for next week. And this is the one that you did before. After you've looked at that, you can give me this part. That's good. Yeah, you did pretty good. Yeah, that's good. So anyway, all right. I think I talked about this before. Come in on, I shouldn't have changed that because that only applies to the seniors. You guys, geez, what day was that? Whatever day you come in on I think it's the Monday. Shoot. On Monday, what is that? 14th? Yeah, come in with your a good draft so that you can have that properly peer reviewed by someone, okay? That's the 14th is still in your future. If I want to give some time, precious time in class for you guys to get some good peer reviewing, I really want you to do that. If you guys show up and you're like, you guys don't have any, you're really going to be under the gun because the thing is due on the 18th, right? So yeah, don't be that one person that like doesn't. The 26th of December? It's after it's due. Yeah. This could be a problem. All right, so have your... Hi. Sure. Yep, okay. Yep. Uh-huh. Okay, so there we go. I've got it up there. Be ready for it. Let's go ahead and stand for the pledge. Okay, ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah, when I set a due date for something big like that, it's kind of like the 10% off for each day late, so you kind of want to make sure those, because there's a real incentive. I'm carving aside the break so that I can sit down and read all of your first draft IAs with the attention that is deserved for them, so I can give you good feedback, so that you can incorporate that feedback when I have a meeting with you early next semester, so that you can do a really good final draft. As it turns out, we got an overlap because I'm at that stage with the seniors. I'm going to get all of their papers at the beginning of the break, and so I'll be reading them for final evaluation, and then there's nothing more that can happen to them. Their scores get submitted to IB, and then IB, I think I've gone through this with maybe you guys or maybe some of the other ones. Which ones are IB actually going to look at? Of the ones that I submit, all the students, they'll pick the top ones and the bottom ones and some in the middle. So I have to give like an honest grade to it. And then, because then IB, if I give too high grades, IB will drag them all down. If I give too low grades, then IB will drag them all up. So I give the grades they deserve, and IB usually comes in pretty close to what I've done as far as like how those get evaluated. Last year, because that was the only thing that IB looked at for the history, because they weren't doing essays. Evan, we didn't have any essays last year for the seniors. So here's the bad news. COVID continues on until the very end of your senior year. The good news is you won't have to write essays. It'll just be based on your history IA, right? Because they won't be gathering for essays. But don't count on that. But last year, then they said submit all of them. So, I mean, IB kind of didn't care as much what I had given as a grade. They evaluated them all individually themselves. Okay? So, does that help? Did I get your temperature? Can't remember. I think I did. We'll get an extra temperature. There we go. Not that this has actually identified whether or not somebody is COVID positive, because it's a forehead thing. Yeah, you could be very asymptomatic. You do have a forehead. You do. Is there? I don't know. I have other means of determining whether or not there is stuff in there. Not generally, but specifically as to particular knowledge. Yeah. No, it's an assessment. It's on many days it's called a quiz. Okay, now I want to direct you to where we're at right now. I think we actually got through the Russian Revolution stuff pretty well. Yes? Yes. In your notes, where last we left off, we have Lenin ostensibly taking charge of the Russian government enough so that they can quit the war. All right? What was the name of the treaty that Germany and Russia entered into? Yeah, that one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the treaty of hand over a lot of territory in order to get out of the war. It's like, hey, will this mean we don't have to fight anymore? Yes, you won't have to fight the Germans. But actually, at the beginning of the next unit, we're going to see the Russian Revolution, Russian/Civil War. There are going to be a lot of people dying before the communists are going to be able to like solidify control over that population. It's going to be very sad. But some parts will break away. Estonia, woo. Latvia, Lithuania. Poland will be an independent country. Finland will be independent countries. Yeah, exactly, for the Baltics. Yeah, no kidding. But yeah, that got Russia out of the war. So, but were the Germans able to pull all of the troops that they had dedicated to fighting the Russians? Were they able to pull them all away and send them to the Western Front? No, why not? Yeah, I mean, they needed enough troops there to occupy that area. And it didn't make any difference anyway, because was more mouths to feed on the Western Front going to help the Germans win against the British and the French? Yeah, notice the way I put it. Mouths to feed. Were they getting enough food? No. I mean, it's not like they weren't growing crops in the field, but it just wasn't enough. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know. Yeah, Russia was still like a mess, though. Yeah, they didn't have. They had. I mean, that's. It's an idea. It's like, hey, we can trade with you, and you really don't have much to go on either. They were having food riots too. So, this is actually. I'll just throw this one up here. This is interesting as far as it's a commentary. We have gone through the 100th anniversaries of all these different important events associated with World War I. The 100th anniversary of the beginning of World War I, the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. Austin, what was the date for the 100th anniversary of the end of fighting on the Western Front? What year? Let's start with the year. What is 100 years after the fighting, after the armistice was entered into to end the fighting, all quiet on the Western Front? The fighting stopped before 1919. The fighting stopped on 1918. So the 100th anniversary will be 2018. Okay, we seem like we got a little bit of an expert here. Let's see how much he knows, all right? What month in 1918 did the fighting stop? It's actually not that hard to get this one when you think about it. Yeah, yeah. If you're thinking Veterans Day, you're going to be on the right track. What month? November. Very good. What day? The 11th. What hour did fighting stop? The 11th hour. Very good. We have Veterans Day, and a lot of times in our Veterans Day, which would be the equivalent of Armistice Day, which is what they still call it in Europe, we have like flags and so forth. We have associated with flags on Veterans Day, Memorial Day. The Europeans, particularly in the British, for example, associate red poppies for Armistice Day. So like my mom, who's British and so forth, for Veterans Day, Armistice Day, she would wear a red poppy made of fabric. You're like, why red poppies? Well, there's so many red poppies that grow in the fields of Belgium and northern France, and there were so many people that were buried there that you had these red poppies just sort of filling the cemeteries and so forth, so they associate that with the end of the war and with World War I. This is what the British did. You can put this down. This is actually a statistic. They determined that the number of British, and I think they've got the Canadians in there too, as well as Australians, New Zealanders, South Africans, Indians, other people from British colonies in Africa and the Caribbean and so forth that had died. And if you look at the number of people that actually died for like Germany and Russia and so forth, the numbers are actually quite a bit higher. France is, I want to say, maybe even a little bit higher than that. What they did is they, as a commemoration, they put a red poppy, a ceramic red poppy, around the Tower of London, the old royal structure in the heart of London. They got this big moat around it, and so it created quite a visual impression as they were placing them in there bit by bit by bit, and people were looking going, oh my gosh, the enormity of all of the individual lives represented by individual red ceramic poppies all the way around the Tower of London. Very impressive. Well, I guess, yeah, we should not have a 9/11 like memorial in New York City. It's just like, well, you know, it's not a very practical thing. I mean, memorials are interesting. I would imagine this one, as far as like, you know, after, because I think they did remove them. I would imagine that they were there for quite a long time, and as they were putting them in, it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't know that they're still there. They may not be there. But as far as like a fundraiser, I mean, think about it. If you could sell those off as individual pieces. I mean, people who are like, we're going to tear down like an iconic stadium for some sports team, you know, what do? Just tear it down and throw it all away? No, you sell off the pieces to like nostalgic sports fans and go, hey, I got a seat from, you know, the old stadium. Cool. I mean, they do that at Boise. They sell off the old blue carpet. They do. They sell off squares. Are there people that are that fanatic about Boise State football that would buy those? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh. Yeah, it's college football. Yeah. So, all right, now, let's turn our attention. I want you to specifically turn your attention in the handout to the back side. We've been kind of going in order, sequentially and so forth, but this is one of those units that clearly has like overlap. In fact, most of the units are overlap. The only one I can think of that's like completely standalone, actually the last one was part of a paper 3 unit leading up to World War I on the emergence of the Americas and global affairs 1880 to 1929. We did 1880 all the way up to 1914. Mexican Revolution is a separate standalone unit. But I'm going to pause right here on the effects and results of the war. I'm not going to do that. So in your notes, what you should be looking at is about 2/3 of the way down, or excuse me, 1/3 of the way down, emergence of the Americas and global affairs. We're going to look at the focus on the United States and the other Americas. Most of the United States here, but eventually we'll be getting into like Canada, Mexico, Brazil, and so forth in here. So we're going to go through that part and then double back to the effects. Okay? So really hone in on the American stuff. And actually, that's where your textbook has been very, very helpful, because the textbook is a U.S. history textbook, and so it tends to look at things much in the light of the United States of America. So are you ready for that? All right, let's start it off with this. The United States of America, write this down. We did not want to go to war in World War I. You got that? You ready? We're doing the notes. The United States did not want to get involved in World War I for a lot of reasons. It's a European war. What the heck? We don't want to be involved in a European war. Since when have we ever been involved in a European war before World War I? Never. Never. When we fought Spain in the Spanish-American War, did we fight on European soil? No. Where did we fight? Yeah, the Caribbean and the Pacific, all right? But yeah, it was interesting. I mean, we never went. I mean, the two places where the Spanish-American War did not take place was the United States of America and Spain. Yeah, it's like weird, you know? I was like, what the heck? But, I mean, who gave the advice? Raise your hand if you can tell me. Who gave the advice early on in our country's history to, like, stay out of European wars? They're, like, nasty and ugly. George Washington, write that down. George Washington, hey, you know, he's the man. He's got a lot of credibility. He's a smart guy. He got our country off to a really good start. I mean, really, he gave some very good examples. He's like, it's time to go. I'm no longer going to be the general of, you know, the Continental Army. Wow, you're not going to be a military dictator? Nope. It's time to go. I'm not going to be the continual president of the United States of America. Wow, okay. And so he gave this advice, and it was really good advice in the early stages, because the United States was a very small country. What would happen if we got in the middle of like a Britain-France, you know, nasty fight? We could get bloodied. I mean, we ended up getting drawn into the War of 1812, and we were fortunate to get out of there with a tie. Okay? It was a tie. What happened to the United States Capitol, Washington, D.C.? It got burned. How did we do against mostly just Canadian forces when we attacked up into Canada? I mean, we couldn't even beat Canadian militia with a handful of British regular soldiers. I mean, hello. Okay, Andrew Jackson. We beat him in New Orleans. Boom! That was after the bell rang and the war was officially over. But, you know, we didn't know that. You know, the punches were still flying and so forth. The American Revolution. What was the only reason we won that? France. Thank you very much, France. So we stayed out of that. But, write this down, but by 1914, the United States is a big player on the world scene. We have economic interests all over the place. Our trade has us closely connected to Europe. They're a huge trading partner of ours. It's going to be really hard if somebody says, oh, we're at war right now, don't trade with either side. Really? Don't trade with either side? The American economy can withstand cutting off trade with all of the warring European factions? No. And here's another thing. Could we actually stand up and be okay and not be crushed if we got in the middle of a European fight? By 1914? Yeah. Yeah, we're a big country now. Biggest economy, biggest industry, and thanks to Teddy Roosevelt and others, pretty darn good military, you know? Yeah, I mean, we don't have as many soldiers, but if we had to, it'll take us a while. We could get a lot of soldiers onto ships, send them over, and did we have an impact to cause the end of World War I? Yeah, I like the kinda. Yeah, were the Germans already starving before we arrived? Yeah, yeah. Would France and Britain have been able to beat Germany if we hadn't joined the war? Probably. It probably would have taken longer. Yeah. But I love if World War I was a bar fight, right? The characterization of America. And remember how America was characterized? Did you guys get a chance to watch that one? I don't think we get a chance to see it in class. That was where America comes in near the end of the bar fight, picks up a chair, hits Germany as they're already lying on the ground, and then claims victory. I was like, okay, we like to do that. We beat Nazi Germany with a little help, a lot of help from the Soviet Union. We'll get to that later in World War II. But here's the deal, okay? The United States was a major trading partner. Oh, and just let's kind of get the big context. Give you the big context. At the end of World War I, write this down, because this is going to be relevant to this. At the end of World War I, and we'll come back to this again. At the end of World War I, a lot of people in the United States looked around and said, I don't think that was really worth it. Yeah, it happens. I mean, like, let me see, how many countries involved in World War I looked at it and said, wow, that was not good. Like most countries, like, and including the winners. I mean, a lot of the winners are like, man, we hate war. What was this for? I mean, did anyone profit from this war? Did anyone profit from the war? A lot of industries. What kind of industries in particular profited? Munitions industries and so forth. They profited. So American soldiers are getting shot up, but American businesses, and particularly munitions industries, are doing very well. So afterwards, people are looking going, looks like some kind of conspiracy. We went into this war just so that munitions industries could make money for themselves and line their pockets. Yeah. Does it sound like a Thanksgiving dinner conversation? Okay. But here's the deal. Put this down, because this is actually, we'll be addressing this. After World War I, for like the next 20 plus years, there's a really strong feeling in the United States to stay out of European affairs and even global problems. Maybe we'll get involved in Latin American issues, but stay out. So for example, when Hitler's doing this, that, and so forth, the United States is like, There literally is a movement, and it's called, you can write this down, America First. America First. And this is going to be in the 1920s, and especially in the 1930s, America First. And the idea behind America First is, let's not worry about what's going on in Europe. If we get involved in European wars again and conflicts, we're just going to end up a lot of people dead, although the armaments industries are going to make a lot of money. And so it's interesting because I remember when President Trump used the expression America First, I mean, it had some overtones of what was coming out of the 1930s, but more of it was sort of like an economic focus on American domestic things and things like that. But there's a history behind that phrase. And it's isolationist. It's like, stay out. So did we get involved in World War World War II? Yeah. I mean, who got us into World War II? Oh, here we go. Another date. What was the date that Japan attacked us that brought us into World War II? No. Christmas Day. It was a Sunday, though, and it wasn't December. I just said it wasn't December. Close. You're one day off. December 7th. What year? 1941. You can make a little note of that. And what got us into the war? Japan attacking us. So why did we fight Germany? Because Hitler's stupid and he declared war on us. Okay? Otherwise, we would not have been involved probably directly in the European war. But even after that, I mean, think about that. I'm doing the big picture of this like attitude toward war of the United States of America. Because after World War II was over, then we're like, whoa, the Soviet Union, they're kind of dangerous. And we still kept up in the world. Although, over the last 50, 60 years, sometimes we get really involved, Korea War, Vietnam War, but we're like, whoa, that's painful. And then, I don't know, Afghanistan. We're pulling troops out of Afghanistan. What? I thought we knocked out the Taliban. The government that was there that allowed for Al-Qaeda to do training camps so that Osama bin Laden and his boys could like figure out to do a terrorist attack on us. What was the date of that? 9/11 what year? 2001. And yet, I mean, we're pulling out. How many of you guys are like, no, we should stay in there and get the job done? Give us another year on top of the 20 years that we've been there. I mean, it's hard. Who's going to end up probably in control of most of the country in Afghanistan when we leave? Taliban and their buddies? Oh my gosh. How many of you guys like look at the flags there? How many of you guys are like identified a place in the world that the United States needs to get militarily involved in? I mean, if Taiwan gets attacked, Olympic Games, there we go. If Taiwan gets attacked by China, you guys are like, hey, we got your back, Taiwan. That's what we've said since 1945. Do we really have their back? Is there the American will? Well, make sure you write this down. 1914, there was no American interest in getting involved in World War I. And we are literally going to have to be sort of dragged into it. And when we do ultimately get into World War I, there's still going to be a significant number of people that are like, no, we should not have done that. It's not worth it. Got it? People don't like to go to war, mostly in this country. I mean, we will if we get attacked first. That's usually what does it. And then you're like, is there a conspiracy to like set up an attack or something like, I mean, what's going on? And what constitutes an attack? Well, let's get into the details here. Did the United States economy want to stay out of the war? Heck no. Heck no. The United States economy is going to benefit. Write that down. We are going to benefit from World War I. Because there's a lot of people that want to buy up a lot of stuff, food, resources, military equipment, because they need that stuff right now when they're fighting. And who's going to get it? Germany, Britain, France. Which?
All of the above.
Would we sell them to all of the above? Would we be happy to sell to all the different things? That's pretty cynical. When you sell to all, does that ever happen in history, when you sell weapons to both sides and you make a mint and all the both sides are, oh my gosh. Well, here's the deal. You know this, we've covered this before. Which of those countries, Britain, France, Germany, is not going to get the benefit of trade from the United States as far as any real, supplies? Yeah, you guys know this. Germany is not going to. Let me get some statistics in your notes. You can see it from this chart up here, and then the details I'm going to give you as well in your notes. It's from the textbook, so make sure you write this down, and it mirrors this. We're going to talk about trade, the amount of trade, the value of trade between the United States and 3 different countries in 2 different years. The first year is 1914, before the war. The second year that I'm going to give you is 1916, after the war has gotten going for a while. All right, here we go. Let's start with Germany. Germany is reflected on this chart by the red line. So the numbers I'm going to give you will also be represented here. Okay? In 1914, the value of trade is $344 million. $344 million in dollars from 1914. So that would be worth a lot more in the current dollars. $344 million between the United States and Germany. So there's a lot of trade going on between them. It drops by 1916, ready? To 288,000. Or if we want to put it a different way, that would be 0.288 million. Yeah, 1916. So it pretty much disappears. Mia, why does the trade between the United States and Germany disappear for the most part? The British blockade, yeah. The war started in 1914. The 1914, so that's up to that point in time. Okay? So 344 million. And then it drops down to practically nothing. And why? The British are they have the blockade, so they basically tell American ships, don't go through here, otherwise we'll board you and we'll take you over, and yeah. Does that make sense? 288. Yeah. Yeah. 288,000. Yeah. 288,000. Yeah, it's it disappears practically. So, American merchant companies, shipping companies, are they upset that they can no longer trade with Germany? Yeah. Sure they are. So they're complaining. But are they going to be able to make it up by expanding their additional trade with partners like Britain and France? Yeah, you'll see. More than enough. They're going to make it up. Here are the details for Britain. You ready? 1914. By 1914, it's 594 million. And Britain on this map would be represented by the yellow line. So there's a lot of trade to Britain. They're a big trading partner. It will increase by 1916 to 1.5 billion. Yeah, so it's almost like a 3-fold increase. 594 million to 1.5 billion. So it's going through the roof. The British are really benefiting a lot from having access to U.S. trade. And think of this as well. Yeah, it's not just the United States. It's all of Latin American countries. And although a lot of other areas of the world are under colonial imperial control, that's just kind of indicative. The British blockade is almost completely cuts off the Germans. That's why they're starving toward the end of the war. France, let's go with France. France on here is going to be the green line. Starts out at 159 million. In 1914, 159 million, and that will increase to 628 million by 1916, and then it continues going up. You can see this chart actually takes it out all the way to 1917, and you can see it's still, rising. Okay? Got that? So who gets the advantage of trading with the United States during World War I? The Allies, exactly. Okay? So it's we're neutral. But are we really neutral? It's if these two get into a fight, I'm neutral. Would you like to buy this gun? Really? Is that neutral? That's not neutral. Yes, Austin. Yeah, 628 million. That would be in the year 1916. All right, so now we get to Germany. What is Germany going to do about it? They're going to go, this is not fair. United States, stop trading with them. They're going to start sinking ships. Write it down. February 1915, the Germans start sinking ships. Now, could they put in, is their navy big enough and equivalent enough to Britain to, like, actually, that's almost like kind of ridiculous. It doesn't, yeah, February 1915. I mean, it doesn't take that much, cutting off that much ocean to stop stuff going into Germany. If Germany tried to do the equivalent, they would have to almost kind of like do this big, huge arc around Norway to Spain. Oh, and then they'd actually have to cut off the Mediterranean access. I mean, the German Navy can't do it. All the German Navy can do is sink ships. Write that down. You know this. We've covered this. They sink ships. They sink merchant ships. Right? They obviously sink French and British merchant ships, but they're sinking neutral merchant ships too. They're basically saying, hey, we can't pull up next to you and threaten you, because if we pull up next to you in our little submarine, yeah, you're probably going to be accompanied in a convoy by a destroyer or some kind of thing that's going to fire off shells and like puncture holes. The only way U-boats can be successful is if they're stealthy. They sneak up on you. They pop up just above the water. They fire off 1 or 2 torpedoes, and then they dive back down very quickly. Does that have an effect? Yeah, because some shipping companies are like, whoa, this is not very good. Although they're like, wow, the profits are great. I mean, you can just see the guys in New York going, wow, the profits are great. Sucks for the merchant guys on the ships that are actually going down with their ships when they're sunk. And what is the response from the United States? Well, we don't like it. We don't like it. But is it enough to get the United States in the war? Write this down. Lusitania, May 1915. Very bad publicity, especially because it was a passenger ship. Sammy, it was a passenger ship. What did the Germans say about sinking passenger ships? Yeah, there was that. Oh, there was a warning. We're going to warn people that we're going to sink passenger ships. Or was it more than that? Was there something more that the Germans were saying about what was on that passenger ship besides passengers? They had pretty good evidence that there was other stuff on the ship. Yeah, other kinds of supplies, including weapons and things like that. So, I mean, shame on the owners of the Lusitania. They're like, oh, I don't know. It's kind of like you're walking down the street and you're like, I'm just going to go to the store to pick up some convenience thing. And you see some teenagers. So you're like in your 20s. You see some teenager and they're like, hey, could you do me a favor? Could you take this money and buy me some alcohol in that store? Are you going to, are you going to be in trouble? Is there like any consequence from that? Or is it like, oh, it's just a convenience thing? Oh, we're the Lusitania owners. It's just a convenience thing. We'll just take some weapons. It's just a convenience thing. No problem. No compulsions. No. But did the United States enter into the war after those ships were sunk? No. But notice this. People are starting to get more and more upset. Particularly, look at this. In the United States, who's going to be more upset about the sinking of ships and the guys that are on the ships? East Coast, United States, or the western part of the United States? Not Alaska. The eastern part, okay? The eastern part. But here's the deal. President Wilson says, dude, after the Sussex, write this down. The Sussex was a French passenger ship, right? But, weapons and other kinds of stuff and so forth on the same. That was sunk on March 24th, 1916. So the Germans have been doing this a while. President Wilson for the United States issues what is referred to as the Sussex ultimatum. Basically, Germany, you keep sinking ships without warning. Hello? They're not going to give warning as if they're a U-boat. Then we're going to break off relations. Ooh, that's a big threat. Well, what could happen after you break off relations?
Literally nothing. Germany can't trade anyway.
Well, I mean, what could be the next step if we break off relations? Could be U.S. going to war. So does Germany take that threat seriously? Yes, what do? They stop sinking ships. Very good, write that down. I'll give you the dates. Germany stops sinking ships, merchant ships, neutral country ships like the United States and so forth, Latin American countries, from May 4th 1916 until January 31st, 1917. January 31st, 1917. And think of it this way. For that time period that Germany's not sinking those ships, it keeps the United States officially out of the war. But what are United States merchant companies doing during that time period? Are they selling more stuff or less stuff? They're selling more because it's safe. It's kind of like, hey, we can sell more. Here, have some more guns. And the Germans eventually are going, forget this. We're going to take a chance. And they start taking a bunch of big chances in 1917. The big one is they resume unrestricted submarine warfare. You got that? In fact, January 31st, the Germans start sinking U.S. ships and so forth again. Meanwhile, there's a presidential election going on. This is America, man. We have our presidential elections on schedule every 4 years. What the heck? Abraham Lincoln's, I got a war to fight here, the Civil War. We're having a presidential election. He stood for re-election during the Civil War. Did he win? Why did he win? Because the Civil War was going well for the Union. Yeah, I mean, think about it. People look back on 2020. What is one singular thing that's going on in 2020 that has an impact on the re-election effort of Donald Trump? I mean, there's a lot of different things and so forth, but COVID, yeah. I mean, I think it was fair to say that Trump would have a much better chance to get reelected if he didn't have to deal with the whole COVID thing and the implications of how he's handling it and yada, yada, yada. Well, how's Wilson handling World War I in 1916? The public likes it, yeah. The public likes it, because what are we doing? We're going, Germany, don't sink our ships. And we're staying out of the war. Did Wilson, write this down, did Wilson promise to stay out of the war? His supporters are like, he kept us out of the war, but did he promise to stay out of the war? No, he didn't promise, because if you make a promise, I mean, who knows what the other side's going to do? Oh, promises matter to politicians, because if you make a promise and you break the promise, is that going to come back and haunt you? Yes. George H.W. Bush, president for 1 year, one term. During his first term, he did not like tax increases. He basically said, campaign promise, read my lips, no new taxes. But when push came to shove during a very difficult thing, he compromised. I mean, politicians do that. They compromised, gave a little here, gave a little there. Part of that was a tax increase. His opponent, Bill Clinton, used that, wrapped that around him and said, you can't trust him. If a politician makes a promise, then those are going to be, if they're broken, they're going to come back around. And that helped Bill Clinton to defeat George H.W. Bush. Yeah, I remember when my dad was running, he's like, I make no promises. Although he joked about it, he said, I'll make a threat. If I'm defeated, I'm going to move back to Idaho with my 7 kids and place that entire burden on the Idaho public education system. But actually, we didn't move back. We were still educated in Virginia. But so Wilson wins, right? But we go into the war nevertheless. Was it just because the Germans started sinking ships? No. It was not just because the Germans started sinking ships. The Germans did sink 4 U.S. ships in the month of March 1917. But the real tipping point came with this. Yeah, the Germans took a really big risk. Now, they didn't do it publicly. They wanted to keep it secret. Part of the reason the United States got into World War I was because of spying. If you're going to be a good spy, how many of you guys have ever had a secret, you shared it with somebody, and you were like, do not let this out? How many of you guys have ever discovered a secret that was not supposed to be shared with you, but it got out and it was like, oh, I really have a much better view of the way things are now. Germany was trying to figure out what to do with the United States, and they're like, okay, who's out there that doesn't like the United States? Mexico does not like the United States. I mean, we took a bunch of land away from them in the Mexican-American War, and we were continually in their face and so forth. Germany's foreign minister, their top foreign policy guy, Arthur Zimmerman, sent a secret note to Mexico. It's a secret note. It was encrypted with, as it turns out, a really lame cipher encryption method, because the British are going to get hold of it. Here's the substance of the note. Take a look here. Hey, Mexico, we're anticipating we're going to have some problems with the United States of America because we're sinking their ships again. And so they're probably going to be at war with us. And so what we would like you to do is to enter war with the United States, and we guarantee that when you beat the United States, if, you will get Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. It's like, I mean, they might as well have just said, oh, and you can take Colorado and Utah and everything up to the north of the Idaho border. I mean, give me a break. You can have it all back. Oh, and here's another thing. Put this in there. They were also sending messages to Japan. If you join the effort and fight against the United States, you can have California. I mean, it's like, Japan was like, no, no. And Mexico was like, no. I mean, we might like to do that, but it's not going to happen. So why are we even talking about this stupid, like, possible, like, alliance thing? Because the British got hold of it, and they deciphered it, and they gave it to the United States news media. Why would they give it to the United States news media? Exactly. What parts of the United States are going to be like, yeah, Germany, are you getting, ooh, man, we're mad at you, Germany. East Coast, they're already mad. Now it's the West, and Texas. You got Texas now on your side. You got Texas. Man, this thing is baked and wrapped and delivered. Here we go. April, where's the year? Oh, April 2nd, 1917. April 2nd, 1917, President Wilson goes to Congress, asks them to declare war. That's a congressional power. The president can't just do that unilaterally. Congress debates it. It's not unanimous, but they vote in favor of war. And the United States is now at war with Germany. Oops. We'll get to the terms that the United States is going to say. We'll be at war based on these 14 points. I want to do that next time with you guys. Okay? Yeah, well, 14 points. Yeah, it's very controversial. It's not going to work out as well for Wilson as he would have thought. All right, very good. Okay, wipe her down and